Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is February the 23rd, 2022, and it is 5:02 p.m. As a quorum of the committee is in attendance, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Central Health Executive Committee. Managers, this meeting is partially in person and via video conference as allowed under the Open Meetings Act, so we will need to reiterate our ground rules and technology issues. For our meetings today, we expect to have 5 board members physically present at AISD headquarters and 4 board members joining us via video conference. Our staff will be monitoring the feed for the meeting to make sure that it remains visible and audible to the public online and here at AISD headquarters. In the event the online portion of the meeting suffers any loss of video or audio, we will take a short recess to attempt to address those issues. As we have done in our last several meetings, we will entertain a motion to limit debate for the board meeting, and staff will be asked to keep presentations within the preset time limits. Also, members, please ask for permission from the chair before speaking to ensure that microphones can be activated. For our virtual public participants, you will be muted and your video kept off until it is time for you to provide public comment. This will ensure the Board of Managers video feed remains visible at all times as required by state law. When it is time to provide public comment, your microphone will be unmuted and you will be invited to turn on your video if you wish. Our first item of business is public communication. Members of the public who wish to make comments during the public communication portion of the meeting must have registered with Central Health via the online form or by telephone no later than 3:30 p.m. today. Yersinia, did anyone register to make comments?
No one registered to make comments by phone or through the online portal.
Thank you very much, Yersinia. We will now proceed to the Executive Committee agenda. Agenda item number 1, approve the minutes of the Central Health Board of Managers Executive Committee November 17, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion? Manager Brinson?
I move that the committee approve the minutes of the Central Health Board of Managers Executive Committee meeting of the date was February.
No, November 17th.
Oh, November 17th, 2021.
Right. And a second, Julie? I have a motion by Manager Brinson and a second by Manager Zuniga. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 2, review and take appropriate action on the following. A, the prioritization and tentative scheduling of items for consideration at future Central Health Board and committee meetings. And B, the reporting schedules for 2022. Brianna Yanis and Perla Cavazos will be presenting.
Hi, I'll start off by going through the, I think it's on. Can you hear me? It shows green. Yeah. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'll start by going through the March tentative schedules. For March, we'll have Eastern Crescent and strategic planning. So we'll have an Eastern Crescent update, and then a CHIF update, and then tentatively scheduled a fiscal year 22 service delivery budget priority update. And then for executive committee, we will have the regularly scheduled minutes and go over tentative schedules. And then for the board meeting, we will have regular minutes, investments, financials, and then the HUB annual report and disparity study update, a HUB program work update, a HUB vendor contracting data update, and then finance, procurement, operational excellence update, and department operational updates, including technology, finance, and HR.
Dr. Bill.
Mike?
So in addition to what Brianna's laid out, wanted to point out that some of these are placeholders. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the hub report and the disparity studies, and realizing that, I want to make sure that we're bringing timely reports to the board. And so if these are ready, or if it makes sense to move them because there are other items that take priority, we'll certainly do that. But again, it's making sure that it's timely, but it's also in line with where we're headed, especially around the systems planning. So the question is, why even have these placeholders in here? You'll recall discussions from when we adopted the budget back in September, and then more recently in December, as we head into beefing up our support operations so that we can support more robust healthcare delivery operations above and beyond what we're doing today in the coming years. It's making sure that the board is aware of the operational changes that are necessary. And that's just basic acclimation, baseline knowledge, also having the jargon, so that you're informed, so that when we do start bringing business cases to you through the budget process later this year, then you've got that working knowledge to be able to jump in there and understand what it is that we're asking you to fund. So that's the reason for the placeholders, but also with the caveat that, there's certain things that we'll need to focus on. So we may need to bump some things down on the agenda, unless it's the will of the board that you want to hear about it on a particular meeting date, then we'll make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Brianna?
Yeah, so then the next thing we have in here is the 2022 reporting schedule. We've included it in the backup. If anybody has any questions on it, we're happy to answer them.
Okay. Any questions on the reporting schedule from any of the board members? Hearing none. Perla, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I think Mike covered it. This is our proposed reporting schedule for the year, but just know that we might have to shift some items depending on priorities and other factors. But this is the reporting schedule that we will be trying to adhere to. Some of these may be presentations, some may be written updates that are placed in your board packet.
Okay, thank you very much. Mike, did you have something additional to say? I'm sorry.
No, sir, she covered it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any questions, any comments on this tentative agendas for our future meetings? Seeing none and hearing none, I will then go to the agenda item number 3. Confirm the next regular executive committee meeting date, time, and location. Managers, our next Central Health Executive Committee meeting is tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, March the 30th, 2022 at 5 p.m. at AISD headquarters, 4000 South I-35 Frontage Road, Austin, Texas, 78704. At this time, I'm ready to accept a motion for adjournment.
I move for adjournment of the executive committee meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I have a motion from Manager Brinson. I have a second from Manager Zuniga. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? We are adjourned. Managers, we can go directly into our board meeting since it was posted to immediately follow the executive committee meeting. So, good evening again. Today is still February the 23rd, 2022, and it is now 5:12. As a quorum of the board is in attendance, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Central Health Board of Managers. First item of business will be public communication. Members of the public who wish to make comments during the public communication portion of the meeting must have registered with Central Health via the online forum by telephone no later than 3:30 p.m. today. Yersinia, did anyone register to make comments for the board meeting?
No one registered via the online portal or by phone to make public comments.
Thank you, Yersinia. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We will now proceed to the consent agenda. Consent agenda, C1. Approve the minutes of the Central Health Board of Managers January 26, 2022 meeting. C2, receive and ratify Central Health investments for January 2022. Do I have a motion? Manager Musaidi?
I move that the committee approve the minutes of the Central Health Board of Managers. I move that the board approve consent agenda items C1 and C2.
Do I have a second? Manager Brinson? I have a motion by Manager Musaiti. If I have a second by Manager Brinson, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. We will now proceed to the regular agenda. At this time, I will entertain a motion to limit debate on all items in the regular agenda for our meeting this evening. Do I have a motion? Manager Zuniga? And a second. I have a motion by Manager Zuniga. I'm sorry? No, you're fine. Yeah. And I have a second by Manager Musaitif. Any discussion? All in favor? Discussion. Manager Jones, I saw your hand.
Yeah, the word was limit discussion. Do we have time frames, or how do we define limit?
It was 3 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, because she didn't read the motion. That's why you didn't get the time limit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The motion was, I move that the Board of Managers will limit debate on all items on the agenda to 3 minutes per member per item.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any
Aye.
abstaining? Show Manager Valedis as opposing?
Yes, thank you.
Abstention? Okay, motion carries. Item number 1, regular agenda item number 1. Review and adopt the proposed equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. Managers, we have taken our initial steps to take a critical look at our health service delivery system and have used that information to develop the plan that we have been deliberating on for the last 5 months, with our most intensive efforts being done in the last 4 weeks. We now have a guide to follow that will assist us as we begin discussions on implementation and funding to create a system of health service delivery that will benefit the population that we serve for many years into the future. As with any plan, there may be some adjustments and revisions based on future circumstances that could not be predicted. But with this plan, we are clear on the goals that we want to achieve. I would like to thank the Episcopal Health Foundation for the grant that made all of this work a reality. I would also like to thank Monica Crowley and her team for their hard work and dedication in getting us to this point, and thank them in advance for their continued work into the future as we continue to develop our system of care. I would be totally remiss if I didn't recognize Manager Brinson for her leadership in the Strategic Planning Committee to allow the board managers to become knowledgeable and comfortable with the information contained in the plan. Thank you, Manager Brinson. And finally, I would like to thank the folks that did the most of the heavy lifting for this project, the Guidehouse team, Dr. Sharma, Danielle, and Will. We so appreciate the knowledge and expertise you brought to the table for this project. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to thank my fellow board of managers for spending their valuable time to attend the meetings and have robust discussions to allow everyone a better comprehension of the plan that we will hopefully finalize and approve tonight. I would now like to turn the floor over to Monica Crowley to say a few words and introduce our last presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Bell. Monica Crowley, Central Health. Tonight, we are requesting that the board take action to adopt the proposed equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. Dr. Abhi Sharma and Danielle Srinivasan from Guidehouse will be presenting tonight, and Will Murphy is available for questions. These presentations will summarize the presentations that you have received over the past few months on the findings of the Voice of the Community engagement, on the findings of our community's first safety net focused community health needs assessment, and on the gap analysis and capabilities assessment that are the foundations of the goals and imperatives that are part of the proposed equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. And our President and CEO, Mike Giesland, will provide input on what is to come next. I would like to echo Dr. Bell's thanks to the Episcopal Health Foundation for its support of this essential work for Central Health, and all of the Central Health employees, partners, patients, community members, and the Guidehouse and Case Strategies teams who have worked tirelessly to develop this plan over the past few months. I also would like to thank all of the board members for your engagement, your questions, your guidance, and your support of these efforts. Now to Dr. Sharma and Danielle for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. I'll pass it to Danielle to kick us off, and then we can tag team as we progress. Danielle.
Thank you. And we can jump to the next slide, please. So slide 1 of our presentation is just a recap of Central Health's strategic plan objectives, which served as such a strong critical foundation to all of the work that's been completed over the past year in support of Central Health's equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. So serving as guiding principles for this work were the development and execution of a healthcare delivery strategy based on people in place. Number 2, implementing patient-focused and coordinated healthcare systems. And number 3 was implementation of a sustainable financial model for healthcare delivery strategies through fiscal year 2024. So these 3 strategic objectives heavily influenced the work that was completed as we conducted the equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. Next slide, please. Okay, Abhi, did you want to go through this one?
Sure, yeah. So as we think about future strategy, we also need to think about what we are aiming for. And in order to ground and anchor our analyses, we identified some core components that make up a high-performing safety net system. Most of you have probably seen this slide already, but at a high level, this slide reflects the complexity of standing up an efficient and well-performing safety net system. The way to look at it is to, first of all, look at the cogs, the blue cogs that are in the periphery, and think about the services that our population needs. So when I say services, it means services to provide access to healthcare. Think about population health and the services that follow along the continuum of care. Primary care, specialty care, hospital care, and post-acute care. All of these are the core components of what the population needs. But for these cogs to function efficiently, we also need services that are listed in the purple cog in the center. So we know that we serve a very unique population, both in terms of the demographics of that population, the epidemiology of that population, the social determinants of health that influence access to healthcare for that population. And it is extremely important for us to think about how we can make sure that navigation services, care coordination services, disease management services are targeted and geared towards the needs of our population. And for a high-performing system to function, you need both the peripheral components, which are the actual service components, as well as the central components that are navigation and care coordination related services, to not only open access, but also to ensure that people are using that access, and then people are also staying engaged with the system and not dropping through cracks in the continuum of care. Next slide, please. So once we had a good picture of what the structural construct of the future state would be, we started looking at how do we actually get there. And what we did during our engagement were three things. The first one was we conducted voice of community assessments, where we garnered inputs from patients, from stakeholder groups, including nonprofits, from communities, from community organizations, provider systems, to hear what they had to say about what the nature of needs were and how the needs could be met in the future state. The second thing that we did was to conduct the community health needs assessment. So we conducted an assessment of clinical and supporting services needs in the community to identify what the scale, scope, and magnitude of different healthcare needs in our community was and how that was distributed across the geography of Travis County. Now, what came out of this was the equity-focused service delivery strategic plan. So we knew what was needed, and we also knew what the capabilities of Central Health and our partners was. And then what we did was we thought about how our capabilities can be refined into the future to meet the unmet needs in the community, and how we would focus on different areas within the community needs assessment report to target initiatives and be extremely strategic about what we go after first and how we continue to move the ball to meet more needs into the future. Next slide, please. So when we thought about the future strategy for Central Health, and when we looked at what other successful systems are doing, we bucketed our analyses into 4 components that then drove how the strategic plan was structured. So if you think about a high-performing healthcare system that provides services to safety net populations, you need, number 1, access and capacity. Number 2, care coordination so that patients don't fall through the cracks. Number 3, member enrollment and engagement to make sure that access is made available to individuals, and then individuals then use that access to gain access to services. The last thing that we focused on was the system of care infrastructure. Now we know that we depend on a lot of partners for the provision of healthcare services, and staying true to the idea of creating a system of care, we thought about how we can leverage our partners the most to provide care to the population that we are serving, because we clearly know that some of the capabilities that our partners have are really capital intensive, and it is better for us to partner with other organizations for those services versus building those services ourselves. So at the end, we want to focus on these 4 areas in our strategic plan. But these 4 areas are again guided by the goal of the strategic plan, which is the text that you see in the blue and the green text box at the top. So the goal of the strategic plan is to develop an equitable system of care that is comprehensive and accountable while optimizing the collective use of capabilities and resources to serve the safety net population. So the goal here is, again, for us to push for the comprehensive availability of services and accountability within Central Health, as well as with our partners, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our population. So when we think about the strategic imperatives that would allow us to achieve this goal, they align with the 4 key areas that make up a efficient safety net system. So like I mentioned, number 1 is access and capacity. The imperative here is that Central Health will equitably meet the healthcare needs of the safety net community by increasing the number of providers and care teams and the availability of comprehensive, high quality and timely care. If you think about some of the information that we've shared in the past, we know that there is an overall deficit in provider FTEs and nursing FTEs. And when we think about how we meet access and capacity goals in the future, we need to be extremely strategic about where we are going first and how we sequence what needs get met first versus which get met after the meeting of those foundational needs in our community. Number 2 was care coordination. So Central Health will coordinate care for Travis County's safety net population by optimizing transitions of care, by facilitating communication within patients' care teams across the care continuum, and enabling meaningful information sharing. So when we think about how patients use the system, they move from point A to point B, or provider A to provider B. We want to make sure that those transitions happen smoothly so that individuals are engaged in decision-making related to their health, but also that individuals and patients don't fall through the cracks, so that we can provide care across the continuum of care to our patients. Number 3 is member enrollment and engagement. So Central Health will focus on enrollment in identified high-need planning and assessment regions and enhance engagement for the enrolled population, with special emphasis on care transitions, people experiencing homelessness, justice-involved individuals, and communities where English and Spanish are not the primary language. Now, we know that our population has unique needs, and in order to meet those needs, we need to think about how we can create targeted programs that are customized to meet the cultural and social needs of our population so that we can keep them engaged in the long term. The last thing is system of care infrastructure. The imperative here is Central Health will develop a high-functioning system of care to improve health for Travis County's safety net population via alignment of relationships, including joint service delivery planning and facilitation of timely sharing of healthcare data. Now, if you think about 1, 2, and 3, we cannot have 1, 2, and 3 without having a system of care. So the system of care would form the foundation for us to move the needle on access, care coordination, and member enrollment. And when we think about the future, we need to be extremely careful about who we consider partners and how we optimize our relationship with our partners to make sure that everybody within the system is working to the top of their capabilities, and that dependence on partners is optimized as we look into the future. Next slide, please. Now, these 4 imperatives are the pillars of our strategic plan moving forward. Now, if you think about this plan itself, it will have a 3 to 7 year runway, which means that in this strategic plan, we will have imperatives, tactics that would allow us to continually meet the evolving needs of the population over a 3 to 7 year period. Now, in order to operationalize this plan, we need 2 things. The first one is an operational implementation plan, which would essentially include the how of the what that is included in the strategic plan. And operational implementation plans typically include a 1 to 3 year time frame. But what would go with it would be a financial sustainability plan. We know that there's a provider shortage. We know that facilities need to be beefed up. And the core to that is allocation of resources or addition of resources where allocation in the current state is not possible. And that is, again, a capital intensive process. And we need to be extremely careful about how we think about using our finances in an optimized manner while thinking about how we are meeting the needs of our population in a sequential way. So in the next phase, our focus would be on ensuring that our operational implementation plan is aligned with our strategic outlook and that that plan is supported by capital and financial allocations that are truly reflective of our intent to solve some of these problems that exist in a community around access to healthcare. And I think this is the last slide in our deck. I would like to pass it to Mike and Dr. Bell if you have any comments.
Yes, thank you very much. Members, this last slide, and if we can put that up there again, just so we can focus and reflect on it a little bit longer. This is important because, I mean, for several reasons, and the obvious are on its face, but sitting back behind this is the imperative that we also continue to grow as a healthcare district. And when we think about what we need to do, the what that needs to be done, and at what levels in terms of support operations so that outward facing we can have the most robust healthcare delivery operations possible, but also how you build up to those capacities is the exercise that I was referencing earlier, just in terms of being able to start focusing more and more on our support operations. There are some actions underway. We're testing our own capabilities to measure our own capacities and looking at in the future, near term, what do we start doing to build up those capacities? But of the 3 budgets that we have, and if you think of it as people, time, and money as each being its own budget, you pull from all 3 of those budgets in order to be able to make these things happen. And they're the critical building blocks that all great organizations put in place. And at the same time, when you look at these timeframes here, it seems, you can see that 7-year mark. The Guidehouse team has pointed out on multiple occasions, there are some quick improvements that we can deliver on in the near term. And that's what we will certainly do. So this isn't a 7-year staging exercise by any stretch of the imagination. There are near and midterm goals that are sooner than what you might think. But to sum it all up, I mean, this is what it means to be a high functioning healthcare district. Much bigger than probably any of us in this room or even predating us would have imagined even 5 or 6 years ago. And I think this is really exciting work. It's a set of permissions, it's a roadmap, it's an imperative, and it gets us started. And you will have many, many opportunities along the way to influence as board members or to ultimately be the final decision maker as to what it is and how we get there along the way. But I think this gets us started. It helps us focus. It presents the challenges that we need to overcome and work together on. And so I wanted to provide that final reflection and commentary. And in closing, when you look at our mission as it's defined under Chapter 281 and 61, of the Health and Safety Code and providing healthcare and hospital and primary care and other types of care if we're able, this really has us fulfilling our statutory mission to the fullest extent. And so we thank you for your consideration and echoing Dr. Bell's appreciation for all the time and effort that you've put into this, and much appreciation to the staff teams and Monica Shop and the Community Engagement and Outreach Shop that also worked with Guidehouse to pull this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giesland. Members, what I think I'd like to do.
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giesland. Members, what I would like to do is to, since this is an extremely important plan for Central Health, I would like to get each board member's either comments or questions before I accept a motion. So I will go around the room here at AISD. I always get those initials mixed up. And then I will go online and ask for members to give me any comments or questions, and we will address them. So, Manager Matwani.
Just a quick comment, echoing, of course, all the thanks that's been echoed to the parties and stakeholders that were most obviously involved. And I also wanted to shout out to all of the patients who are sort of the subtext stakeholder here. And very often in our world of safety net services across the board, from social to clinical, folks are shuttled around and surveyed at every corner and every step. And it requires a high degree of cultural competence. And I know that our outreach team ensures that that's the case because it's the culture of this organization. However, the insights that we've derived and that enable us to have, hopefully some really, if not clear, at least directional marching orders. Those folks have done a lot to inform our work. So I really appreciate it. And I also, on that note of cultural competence, want to call out uniquely, at least in my short time here, managers Valedis, Jones, and Musaita for being tireless in the pursuit of the kind of cultural competence that gets us the kind of feedback and that memorializes so many of the watershed systemic inequity issues in a plan like this. I'm really, really happy to see a lot of the notions that we've been challenged with memorialized in this plan. So thanks, Dr. Bell.
Thank you, Manager Matwani. Manager Zamora?
Just one thing. I want to thank everyone for doing the work that you did. It's incredible. It needs to be done. Hopefully some of the short-term stuff I'll get to see. I'm not sure I'll get to see the long-term stuff since I'm a short-timer still now. But I'll watch from a distance in the future. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Manager Zamora. And hopefully you'll see some of the fruits of the labor.
I will.
Before
I'll
you
be
leave.
watching from a distance.
So, but we'll expect you to view us from afar. Manager Brenton?
I think the most important thing, besides thanking so much the Episcopal Foundation for their grant, is that this is a very large and long goal that we have. It's a very large goal, and I know that it will take us a fair number of years to complete it, but I do think that all of the energy will be well worthwhile, and I would encourage people not to get too frustrated or too looking too far ahead of where we are at the present, because at the present we're just coming up with an agreement to move forward, and I certainly agree with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Manager Brenton. Manager Musaiti?
Thank you, Chair. I definitely echo everyone's sentiments, and thank you to our staff for doing this work and for our community giving their voices, really important voices to. I understand this work is not easy. We have many years to come, but the first way to solve a problem is finding solutions, really what are the problems that we have. I know this report that was delivered to us, we're not surprised by the findings, but at least we can really identify what are the core issues that we need as a board and as a hospital district here to address. And there will be short-term goals that we can achieve all collaboratively working with our community partners. But most importantly is really identifying the gaps of care and where can we really highlight and where should we prioritize delivering this services. I definitely support our plan, and this is something hard-fetched. And I know many health systems we are ahead of the game. Many health systems have not done this work, and when we want to address population health, we need to bridge both public health and healthcare, really to overlap and provide the best quality care for those who need it most. And I commend you on the efforts, and I look forward in really doing this important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Musaitis. Manager Zuniga?
I really appreciate the equity lens and focus that it meets our mission and our goals of us. And I think that it couldn't come at a better time because we're going to lose a lot of providers. A lot of nurses are not going to be part of nursing anymore. So it's going to be more important now than ever to make sure that we're able to provide care for everyone inside Austin. So I think that this timing couldn't be better.
Thank you, Manager Zuniga. Manager Greenberg?
Yes, thank you to everyone who participated from the community, from those who were surveyed or interviewed, Episcopal Health, and of course, and all the staff, of course. And I want to say how important I think it is that there was a specific attention to the safety net population. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Manager Greenberg. Manager Jones?
I'd like to go along with my colleagues in thanking Guidehouse as well as staff and others in bringing us this really fantastic strategy overview of looking of where we should be heading or beginning the process. I still would look forward to us being able to dialogue as we go along the road to update and put some time frames into achieving some of these specific goals, but also putting some timelines on specific objectives within those so that we can share with the public that we're along our way. I feel good about what we've done. I'm quite proud to be of a board that has done this, but I want to make sure that we stay to the roadmap and make it a little more specificity so that we can help explain to the public what we're doing in a more manageable, tangible way versus a more philosophical or a roadmap. So thank everyone for that and look forward to working over the next few months and years in accomplishing these objectives.
Thank you, Manager Jones. And last but definitely not least, Manager Valedis.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, thank you. First and foremost, I'm grateful for us to have staff and consultants that do their jobs and provide us with the information that we should have in order for us to make informed decisions. But I look at my mission, my mission as a member of the Board of Managers is to make sure that we provide access to care for all the people that need it. And we have not. We have so many uninsured in Travis County, and I believe that it's our role to provide access to insurance and access to services for those that don't have it, that are within 200% and lower of the federal poverty guidelines. I was hoping that this was going to be a roadmap to show us how we could achieve that goal, expanding MAP Basic, doing something different with the hospitals that we work with and the organizations that we partner with to provide insurance and access to healthcare to everybody that doesn't have it. That's our role. And those are the neediest in Travis County. I'm still waiting for that to happen. I'm hoping that this will help us do something, but as far as I'm concerned, we have still yet to achieve that. And until we do, we will have and continue to have huge disparity gaps. I want us not to lose sight of that. Okay? It's not about funding who we've been continuing to fund. It's about looking at providing insurance and services to everyone that doesn't have it. Not based on our contracts with Ascension Seton, not based on the agreements we have with the other funded agencies. We were created to serve the indigent, the working poor, and the underinsured, period. That's a lot of people. And I'm hoping that this is one more step in the road to providing those services to all those people. I still am concerned about whose lens is going to be used to view whatever information you're receiving from those interviewed or those that are going to be interviewed in the future as we seek to tweak this strategic plan. I'm very concerned about that. We must be using a demographically representative equity lens, not something that's been created or put together by a contractor consultant, but starting with the people and using our patients and the uninsured and the people that we were created to serve as a basis for determining what the needs are. They should tell us what the needs are. We shouldn't be telling them what their needs are, and this is how we're going to achieve them, how we're going to close those gaps and provide those services. We know that they want services in the areas that they live. Our clinics are going a lot farther down the road for providing those services in the areas that they live. But I don't think that we should be using I-35 corridor as a basis for achieving those goals. I think decentralization and moving services into the clinics is necessary, not centralizing. And so anyway, I do want to thank the efforts that have been made. I want to thank my board members for being open to the idea that we exactly have disparities and we have marginalized populations whose needs have yet to be addressed. And I'm hoping that you all will commit to addressing those needs and providing those services by using them as the basis for which the framework will be created, and engaging our partners to help come up with an agreed upon solution and strategy to close those gaps. Again, it's all about our patients, and it's all about the patients that we have yet to enroll in our services plan. And that's the much greater number. And that is why I remain hopeful that we will one day close the gap by providing health insurance and access to services to all those under 200% FPL.
Manager Valedis, your 3 minutes is
I
long
appreciate
gone.
it. I'm just going to close it up. Dr. Bell, thank you very much. And again, please keep that information in uppermost in your mind. And thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, Manager Valedis. We appreciate those comments. Mike Giesland, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you for recognizing me. In response, Manager Valedis, we agree. Our focus has been, is, and should always be indigent that we are statutorily obligated and are privileged to serve. And it's a privilege to be part of somebody's life in the way where you provide access to healthcare. And you know, those of you that are out there in the community serving or practicing medicine, you understand that probably more about that individual relationship than anybody. But we look at it through that lens when we talk about bringing about health equity, is what do we do to make that person's life the healthiest life possible? And that is what I mean by privilege, to be able to provide that. So we agree. Second, just a quick reminder for everybody, because it's something that you said, Manager Valedis, that made me think of this, is that a lot of the inputs that went into this, we were fortunate to work with Guidehouse, But our data and analytics team provided a lot of input and work and effort into bringing this about. So this wasn't just a hypothetical data set. This was something that was real, built around our patient population, built around our care management experiences. And this really made for a robust study, probably more so than other consulting deliverables than I've seen in the past, and I've seen a lot. So it was very much a team and coordinated effort in that regard. And kudos to the staff and Sarita Shop and others for helping out with that. Manager Valedis, you also speak to in the last comment, Mr. Chair, is that getting into some of the modalities, that is absolutely part of the next steps on this. Tonight, it's about the imperatives and the general direction for staff to go and do, and then come back with plans to say, okay, this is how we're going to get there, and this is how we're going to fund it. And it coincides real nicely with the budget process that's coming up for fiscal year 23. And so again, as the ultimate decision makers, and budget being the ultimate expression of policy, you'll have that opportunity to look into and see what the modalities are that are going to be most efficient in circling back around to, yes, serving those that need health care the most. And so that's precisely what it's about, Manager Valedis. So thank you very much for your comments, and thank you very much for allowing me to tag on to those.
I just would like to say one thing. Dr.
Yeah,
Bell?
yes. Manager Valadez?
1 minute. Mike, I appreciate you. I feel like I'm in a presidential State of the Union, state of Central Health, state of our marginalized population. I've made my comments and you had to respond to them. I appreciate that, but I also think that our comments are our own and need to be respected. And I thank Mike, and I thank Jason, and I thank Wes for being our team as we look to providing for the services that need to be provided to the people who need it most in the future. But I would really ask that we do not engage in having to respond to someone else's comments. Their comments really should be their own. And as you heard them, is the way I stated them. You can choose to interpret them however you want. I just was trying to remind myself, if no one else, that in fact, we were here to provide services to our indigent, to our underinsured, and our working poor. And I think that we have a long way to go to get there. And I am very glad to be a part of this team that is looking to close those gaps and provide those services. We have a long way to go. We've got to be working together. And even if we have a diverse opinion as to how to get there, we should be listening to each other and coming to some middle ground so that those ends can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Valadez. Manager Musaitu? Then I am ready to take a motion. Manager Musaitu.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the board adopt the goals and imperatives of the equity-focused service delivery strategic plan as recommended by the staff, which will serve as the basis for staff's operational implementation and financial sustainability development work starting with the fiscal year 2023 budget priorities.
Thank you. I have a motion by Manager Musaitu. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second by Manager Brinson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining?
I abstain.
Please show Manager Valadez as abstaining.
And hoping to
motion-
get further answers responded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Valadez. The motion carries. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 2, receive the fiscal year-to-date healthcare service expenditures made by and accept the preliminary January 2022 financial statements for Central Health and Community Care Collaborative. Lisa Owens will be presenting.
Good evening. This is Lisa Owens, Deputy Chief Financial Officer. I have a brief update. We don't have any significant transactions or details to present, but I will give you the highlights of our financial reports. Just get it to the screen. Okay, so just hitting the highlights for Central Health. The most important thing is that we crossed over
Ms.
January.
Owens,
Oh, can
we're
you see my
not
screen?
seeing your presentation.
Ms. Owens,
Okay.
if you could go ahead and maximize the screen on your side, we're seeing a lot of your blue background.
I'm going to share just the document, see if that works. That work?
Yeah.
Can you see the balance sheet?
Yes, we see it now.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Just when you think you get all these sharings figured out. So the highlight for today is that we did cross over that January 31st. As you all know, our primary source of revenue is tax revenue. And that taxes are collected between in the fall, but are due January 31st. So you will see that our short-term investments is at a high point at this time of year at just under $450 million, and our total current assets at $517 million. Our restricted and non-current does include our restriction for capital acquisition. That includes the capital projects that the board has approved and bond funding to support those projects. And then our capital assets at $85 million for total assets of $816 million. Our liabilities for current liabilities are at $50 million. As those tax revenues come in, you will see we do recognize 100% of the tax revenue as it is due and receivable. We still have about $34 million of tax revenue that we anticipate throughout the remainder of the fiscal year. So our total current liabilities at approximately $50 million. We do have the LPPF funds of about $22 million. Those were also a restricted asset. And then our long-term debt year over year, you do see that change as we issued certificates of obligation last year. Our total net assets are at $663 million, and our total liabilities and net assets also at $816 million. So again, looking at our property tax revenue, which is the majority of our revenue that comes in throughout the year, we did bring in about $114 million in tax revenue in January. And year to date, we are at 89% of our budget. I believe we're at about 87% of the total roll. We do budget a little bit less than the total roll just for the timing difference on when those are collected. Our healthcare delivery is at $33 million year to date. I'll go into more details on that on the next slide. And then our administrative program, at this time in the year, we are getting more information as we've executed all of our contracts, and early in the year we make some estimates on expenditures and we get actual results now as we're coming in. So a negative 52,000 there is a reclassification from administration to healthcare delivery, or and also at times the timing difference on those estimates. But our year-to-date consulting is quite low in administration, and our legal fees at $221,000 and other purchase goods at $652,000. Total administrative program is at about 20% of our $13 million budget, the majority of that being in staff, but nothing unexpected. And as we are moving into the second half of the fiscal year, at the end of this month, we are on track with where we anticipate. Our total uses of funds were $9.6 million, and our sources over uses at $105 million, again, due to that significant inflow of tax revenue. In the healthcare delivery program, which is the majority of our expenditures, we did have about $5.6 million in January for healthcare services. That is primarily our contracted services with different primary and specialty care providers, pharmacy services. We also have spent about $4 million year to date in our ACA premium assistance, and those are persons that are enrolled in Sendero's ACA high-risk plan that we are able to support. Our campus redevelopment, we are seeing a little more expenditure in that area, predominantly due to the demolition. You all will recall an increase in our demolition contract. And as we wrap up that project this summer, we'll see some increased costs there that were planned and approved by the board. And then finally, in the operating costs, that does include our healthcare departments throughout the central health. We are at about 17% of our annual budget of 35 million. I'll just hit a few more highlights in that area on this slide. Just looking at salaries, I know we are always wanting to maintain control in salaries. Year to date, we're at about 23% there. And again, at about 17% of our expenditures year to date in that healthcare operating. Also included in your reports are more details at a specialty care service line. And we did go ahead and break out some expansion dollars so that you could see the percentage of dollars spent on our specialty care contracts. The expansion dollars have not been allocated to any specific contracts at this point. So we broke those out so those would be down below here, and we'll have that going forward. So again, as we are 5 months into the fiscal year, 4 months into the fiscal year, I'm already on to next month. 4 months into the fiscal year with this report, we are looking at our expenditures being on track and definitely our revenue where we want it to be with that tax collection. So I can go straight to the CCC, Manager Bell, is that okay?
Yeah, Lisa, why don't you go directly to CCC and then I'll take questions afterwards.
Okay. Just make sure you can still see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, in the CCC, very consistent year over year. As you've seen with the CCC in the past couple of years, we have about $21 million in assets, and it is primarily in cash and cash equivalents. And then accrued liabilities for invoices that have not been paid yet, but we haven't incurred those expenses. We do hold back some deferred revenue. We talked about this at the end of last year as the DSRIP program has a third party that looks at performance outcomes. We've had positive results on everything that's been looked at, but we do make that reserve because we know those reviews are still underway. So our total liabilities are estimated at the end of January at 13.8 million, which leaves about 7 million in net assets in the CCC. I would like to remind everybody that the budget that is in this report, we'll be updating this, is, it's down at the bottom, is the FY20 approved budget. So we have DSRIP revenue that we anticipate in July. As you all know, as we enter in towards the end of this program, we do anticipate that DSRIP revenue for this year to be slightly less than budgeted as we are winding down that program. We have an operation contingency carry forward at about 9 million. And then other sources, which is interest on our cash and cash equivalents. Our expenditures primarily in the healthcare delivery area and DSRIP project costs are at just about 10% of the annual budget. And I'll give you a little more detail on that healthcare delivery. We have our specialty care services and our main contract for inpatient services for behavioral health, as well as our network of urgent care, post-acute care in the CCC. And so those major line items you'll see are at about 21% of their annual budget. And with that, I will stop sharing so you can see everybody, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We appreciate that presentation. Manager Valedis, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and ask your question, and if any other members have questions, please have them ready.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Mine is just a very simple one. Lisa, do we have an idea, or do we have a most recent report on wait times for specialty care for all of our designated areas?
I'm going to defer to John Morgan and ask him to come back with that information. We do not track the wait times in the financial reports.
No,
but programmatically, yeah, we can bring that information back.
What I'm trying to do in my head is, as I look at how much of the budget we're spending, and I'd like to know whether or not we are serving our patients in a timely manner. For me to know that whether or not we need to do something different, with respect to the expenditure of funds, in order to be able to accommodate shorter wait times so that our patients can be served appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Valedis. Any other questions or comments from board members?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Manager Jones.
It's a follow-up on Manager Valedis, I think, question in this sense is that if we have those wait times, can we tell them by either zip codes or sections of the city and the county to be able to ascertain if there are some challenges, either because of transportation, distance from locations or whatever? So as you ask those questions, I think it'd be helpful if we could get that profile as well.
Thank you, Manager Jones. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I will then go forward to the next agenda item. Members, the next two agenda items are our required trainings for the board that we have to go through each year. And so agenda item number 3 is to receive training on open government statutes. David Duncan of the Travis County Attorney's Office will be presenting.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. David Duncan, Travis County Attorney. Thank you all for your attention. Let's see, it's up. Next slide, please. Just real quickly, an overview of why we're doing this and what I hope to accomplish. I'd like all of you to just kind of get a basic grounding in the Open Meetings and Open Records Act. The Public Information Act. I'm dating myself. It used to be called that. Emphasize those portions that most directly affect you in your roles. When you take that online training, it teaches you everything about the Open Meetings Act and everything about the Open Records Act. And a lot of it doesn't relate to you directly and how you serve on the board. And also just to cover some recent developments and changes. Next slide. I'll start with the Public Information Act. This is just sort of a general overview. It governs all public information, which is pretty much anything recorded on any medium. Photographs, memos, emails, text messages, voicemail messages, any kind of recording. Applies to anything that we hold or anything that someone holds on our behalf that we have a right of access to. So if we hire a consultant and they do a bunch of work and they keep it in their file cabinets, if we can ask them for it under the contract and somebody asks us for it, we have to go get it. In order for something to not be released, the only way we can do that is it has to fit within a really specific exception. And there are several dozen of those. Basically, they mostly relate to things that a government entity would want to keep confidential and things that are common sense, like social security numbers and driver's license and photographs of people and other biometric information. The only way you can find that out, whether an exception applies or not officially, is to go to the Attorney General's office for an opinion or have a court opine on that in rare cases. One kind of common misunderstanding is that anything you see or anything we use in a closed session under the Open Meetings Act is also confidential under the PIA, and that is not necessarily correct. We often will be careful what we give to board members and leave with board members in closed sessions for that very reason, because we want to limit the number of copies. And also something that a lot of people fail to grasp about the act is if I have a presentation in a closed session and I scribble notes on it, there are now 2 records, not 1. One is the one that I made for the presentation of the closed session. The other one is the one with your handwritten notes on it. So a lot of times we don't like to have multiple copies out there. Makes it more difficult to produce and also to evaluate those if we're going to ask for an attorney general opinion. Next slide, please. So the process, anyone in Texas, out of Texas, there are limitations on some people out of Texas, but anybody can ask us for information. They don't have to use any magic words. They don't have to say, this is a Public Information Act request. If they write and say, I want a copy of your most recent budget, we have to give them a copy of our most recent budget. We have 10 business days to either release the information or request an attorney general opinion from the day we receive it. If we miss that deadline, it's likely that the information is going to be released. There's some not exceptions, but interpretations of that deadline, that skeleton crew days don't count. And during the disaster, there was a limitation that if the office wasn't staffed, then you didn't have to necessarily hit that deadline. But the legislature in the most recent session did clarify that and say, no, you have to basically use reasonable efforts to get that information. So if you're still doing business, if you're still able to operate remotely, you should be able to find a way to produce records remotely. Importantly, we're not ever allowed to ask somebody why they want something. You know, if they happen to know that there's some document in our files that's very specific and they ask for that, we're not allowed. How did you know about that? Not allowed under the act. If any of you receives a request, please get it to the staff, Perla, Brianna, Mike, anybody, me, and we will respond to it. That is our job. That's our role. We'll help you understand, you know, if Brianna or Perla sends you a request and says, hey, we have a request for this. Do any of you have anything responsive? If you're not sure, we can help you with that question as well. Sorry for the wordy slide. This is just a basic overview of kind of how the process works. We get a request. There are three possibilities. We either give it to them, we seek an opinion from the Attorney General's office, or we hold it. And if someone's ruled, if the AG's office or court has ruled previously that this exact information or information exactly like this is protected, then we can just rely on that interpretation. If we request an AG opinion, they have 45 business days, which is quite a while. And then their ruling will either be that the information must be withheld. That's usually if it's something that impinges on a third party's. If it's somebody's social security number or somebody's date of birth or private information, banking information, protected health information, the information may not be withheld. They rule that it's public, so we have to give it to the requester, or the information may be withheld. There are a number of exceptions in the PIA that are discretionary, and we're allowed to withhold it, but not ordered to withhold it because the privilege, the exception, belongs to us. And then the very last, either ourselves, the requester, or a third party, if they don't like the AG ruling, can go to court and appeal for judicial review. Some of the common things I've heard for many years, and some of these have changed over time. The most common one is, I bought my phone, I pay for my phone plan, there's no public information on my phone. And that there were cases about that over about 15 years. All of them eventually came out against the public official who was claiming that. All of them were elected officials who claimed that. And then the legislature just finally went in and changed the statute and said, I don't care what device it's on. If you're doing public business, it's public information. So don't fall into that trap of thinking, oh, I bought the phone, therefore I can say whatever I want on this phone and nobody will ever find out. This is also, to make very clear, this is one reason we stress that you all have public communication options. We give you all a centralhealth.net email address. That is what is posted on the website for each of you as your contact information. So, all official contact goes to that email address. And I encourage you to use that because it makes your life easier. We don't ever have to ask for your phone. In the event that somebody requests something and it happens to be on your phone, the AG's office is going to want to see your phone, not the thing from your phone. They're going to want to see your phone. So again, encourage you to use those public options. Another common misunderstanding is that if we think something's confidential, it's got to be confidential. Again, it's only if the AG's office agrees with us and it fits a specific exception. I dealt with people who'd been in state government and government for many years and said things like this, which is, if it's transitory, if it's something I'm not going to keep and somebody requests it and it's responsive, I don't have to give it to them because I'm going to throw it away next week. And that is absolutely wrong. People have been sanctioned for that. If it exists the day of the request, it is responsive, you have to have an exception to not release it. Just briefly, criminal penalties that can result from violations of the Public Information Act or refusing to provide public information. So that's where the AG's office has already ruled this is public, and you say, I don't care, I'm still not giving it to them. Providing, distributing, or misusing confidential information. So if a third party gives us something and stamps it confidential and says it's their exception, and you go and give it to or sell it to another party, that could be actionable. And again, all of these, when I'm speaking about criminal penalties, one of the interesting thing in these two statutes that I'm going to cover about criminal penalties is they are not against you in your role as a board member. They are against you personally. So at that point, the county attorney's office, any attorney that works for Central Health can't represent you, because we're not representing a person that's representing the organization. It is you as an individual that is the subject of that criminal complaint. And the last one is destroying, removing, or altering governmental information. And that one's a higher fine, 3 months in jail and $4,000. And now I'll move on to the Open Meetings Act, something that all of you have seen some aspects of coming to all these meetings. Just basically all meetings of a quorum of a governmental body are subject to the act. And what a governmental body is very, very broadly defined. It's water districts and hospital districts and MUDs and all kinds of little things that you wouldn't think. All votes have to be taken in public, with very rare exceptions. There's only a small handful, and I said none of which are ever likely to apply. I was rereading them today, and none of them is ever going to apply to Central Health. And this is a relatively recent addition, that governmental bodies must allow public testimony at all posted public meetings and cannot prohibit that public testimony being critical of any member of the governmental body or the governmental body itself. Now, you can enforce decorum. You can, the speakers aren't allowed to curse someone out, that sort of thing. But if someone says, I think you're doing a bad job, you can't, there were bodies, mostly school districts and other elected bodies, that were saying, you can't say that. You can't talk bad about us. And the legislature said, oh, if we have to listen to it, you have to listen to it. I heard that from more than one member of the legislature when they were debating that bill. What is a quorum? So under statute, there are actually two different answers to this question. This is the more conservative answer. So this is the answer I always use. And that is the number of members fixed by statute. The number of members fixed for this body by statute in Chapter 281 of the Health and Safety Code is 9. So a quorum is always 5 of the full board. You name certain committees, and so they have their own quorum requirements, but for the board, it's always 5. This is a section, I'm going to cover this and I'm going to cover it again later, because this is actually one of the most confusing things about the Open Meetings Act. If the simplest bullet is the one at the top. If there's a quorum and there's deliberation or formal action, and you're talking about the business of the body, that's what we're doing here. That's this kind of meeting. The second type is, let's say there's an open house, and Brianna sends out an invitation that we're having an open house. Who wants to come? And 5 board managers say, I put it on my calendar, I will be there. Is that a meeting? And I'm going to clarify that in a little while, because that is not a simple question. And there have been some AG opinions, and I don't know that there are any cases, but I know that there's been a lot of hand wringing about what that means. And this is sort of a shorthand. If the governmental body conducts and is responsible for or called the meeting. So if it's our open house, it probably is a meeting, because we called it, it's our facility, we own it. Whereas if it's El Buen Samaritano is opening a new clinic and they've invited us to come to their then it may fit more in the social gathering, which is something I'll talk about in a little bit. But those are close questions, and Brianna she's always very quick to point out when, oh, a member has decided to go to this, and I see that someone else is going. Do we need to worry about quorum? And so she's very good about notifying us when there's any kind of event that more than one member might be attending. What is deliberation? This is also something that was misunderstood by a lot of bodies for years. The legislature had to clarify it after some cases. Verbal or written exchange between a quorum of the governmental body or between a quorum and another person, and that including staff. That's what the legislature had to change. There were numerous state bodies even that were having staff briefings, wouldn't notice them, wouldn't invite the public, and they would just sit there and listen to staff. And there were a couple of cases, and then the legislature finally changed the statute a few years ago to say, you listening to staff is you deliberating. They changed the wording, and that is now abundantly clear that if you're just sitting and listening and that's all, it's deliberation. It doesn't, that if you read it in the dictionary, deliberation is thought process. So they had to clarify what that term means. Now, I'm relating this back to that discussion we had a moment ago. When is a meeting not a meeting? So attendance of a quorum at a social function unrelated to the body's public business, an open house, a birthday party if one of the members has a birthday and all the members decide to go, that is not a meeting. I will often request that either I or Trelicia or someone, Monica, I have gone to many of those functions, did for my former board that I was the general counsel for the purpose of enforcing discipline and making sure that people don't stray off into, hey, what that thing that's on our agenda tomorrow? No, you're not doing that. Stop. And so as long as you stay off of discussing the public business, or let's say a member of the public walks up and says, oh, I understand y'all are deliberating your strategic plan study that you did. What's going on with that? You can talk to them and say, yes, it's on our board meeting. Please come offer some public comment if you want. That's fine. That's not the issue. It's the members getting together and talking work. Other examples include conventions and workshops, ceremonial events, press conferences, candidate forums. This is fairly recent. Testifying before the legislature if no formal action is taken, and there's the same in this last part, if no formal action is taken and discussion of public business is incidental to the noted event, that applies to all of these. So press conferences, that last bit about if formal action is not taken and any discussion is incidental, that's all of these. So the social event, the ceremonial event, that applies to all of those. Notices. So local bodies like Central Health, we have a 72-hour notice window. Because our meetings are on Wednesdays typically, we publish our notices by Friday. And that's in part because it would be hard to publish on Sunday. Nobody's at the office to put it in the case. Nobody's there to put it on the website. So we've established a practice of being done by Friday afternoon, which is good. Gives the public a little more notice, a weekend to review. The notice has to include the date, time, and location of the meeting and give reasonable notice of the items to be discussed and or decided. So that's just sort of the very high level, and always keep in mind when we're describing things, when we're writing those meeting notices, the audience is not a sophisticated person. It's not the person, for example, that might be affected if we're gonna do a notice of a property purchase. It's not to describe to that person exactly what we think we might be doing. It's to describe to the public, we're going to talk about this property purchase. So there's no special notice to any person. Committees. Now, committees are required to give notice either if a quorum of the full board is going to be there, the governmental body, or if that committee makes decisions and they are typically either adopted without, so if a committee item typically goes on consent in the board meeting, then that's a committee that needs to be noticed. So it has notice requirements and quorum requirements, just like a full board meeting, depending on its membership. We tend to be cautious and just say, let's just publish it because it's really not that difficult for us. We like the public to know about our meetings anyway. And so we are a little on the cautious side on that, just because honestly, it doesn't really hurt us. We always know well in advance when our committees are going to meet. So we do notice for all of them. The notices have to be posted in a publicly accessible place, and that's accessible to the public. It's supposed to be 24 hours, but there have been some exceptions to that. We do post it in the case outside at Central Health, and we put it on our website, which is important. Not a requirement, but a best practice. Now, closed sessions, which you've all participated in, we can only go into closed session, like the exceptions under the Public Information Act. We only go into closed session if there's a specific exception that allows it. Examples include consultation with an attorney, personnel matters. And personnel matters, interestingly, we crossed this bridge a few years ago. If the board is considering naming someone to another board like Integral Care, or ICC, one of those, Sendero, the board can actually meet under personnel matters, even though that person's not going to be an employee. It also, the scope of it is written such that it can cover appointments as well. So any public position is under that. Deliberations about purchase or sale or lease of real property. Governance of certain healthcare operations. That's often the case with Sendero issues, and would probably be with, I have to think about it, some medical care issues that we might encounter. And one that the board has used once is deliberation of prospective gifts. So if someone's thinking about giving us a gift, you can meet in closed session to discuss accepting that gift. Video conference meeting. This has been a very hot topic since the pandemic, obviously. We can meet in via video conference if the presiding officer and a quorum are physically present at a location specified in the notice. So that's what we're doing here. When the pandemic was on, the governor waived a lot of these requirements I'm going to talk about. So it made it easy. It made it possible for us to do fully virtual meetings, which is no longer possible. There were a couple of bills in the last session to make that permanent, but none of them went very far. So the meeting location and all of the remote locations have to have two-way audio and video. Everybody has to be able to see and hear all the time. While speaking, each participant must be clearly visible. Now that's participant, me as a staff member, a member of the public, or a board member, to each other participant and to the members of the public in attendance here. There are no one from the public here, but we have to have cameras and video monitors here so they can see and hear. Members are present so long as their audio and video is on. The part about being clearly visible and audible only applies when you're speaking or taking action. But as long as you leave your video on, you're there. We have to make a recording available, at least an audio recording available of these. We do post video recordings of these. So again, a best practice, and that has to be made available to the public. That is not defined. Made available upon request or made available all the time. So that actually is not terribly clear. Although we post them on our website, so that's pretty easy. The public can participate in video meetings remotely or in person, their choice. And there is language in the act that allows a member of the public to participate by telephone only. So even though it says there has to be audio and video for a participant, they're actually allowed to participate by phone. That is one little crack exception in the otherwise required video feed. Walking quorum. Now, remember at the beginning of this, I said I was going to focus on the things that really matter to you and your role as board members. This is the biggest one, probably. A walking quorum is several members getting together either in succession or in small groups, never a quorum, and everybody talks about an issue, and then they talk to other people about the issue, and either decisions are made or commitments are made, or frankly, the board just deliberates outside of a quorum, and that is a violation of the act. There was a case in 2019 where the Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that the old language was unconstitutionally vague, and they overturned that portion of the law. So that same year, the legislature came in and changed the language. Now, what I have here in this presentation is I truncated it, but essentially it's engaging in a series of communications outside of a meeting on issues within your jurisdiction in less than a quorum. So that's three big parts. when the member knew at the time that they engaged in the communication that the series of communications eventually involved or would involve a quorum and would constitute deliberation once a quorum. So you know that other people are going to hear about this, and you did it anyway. That's the statutory language. I will tell you that my consistent advice for many years has been, don't talk to more than one of your fellow board members. And if you're talking to that other board member and they say, well, I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this, and they mention another board member, say, I'm not talking about this anymore, and we're not supposed to do that. That's a biggie. Just don't engage in any discussions that you even have the slightest hint will be involved more than one other board member. Don't discuss voting intentions or vote alignments with any other board managers, period. I mean, that's the kind of thing that leads to the issues. Every case that I'm aware of where there was an actual prosecution, it was always about vote alignment, straw votes, straw voting in closed session, which is also a violation. That's something that really, votes are meant to be public, period. That's just the essence of the act. Very practical. Don't copy fellow board members on emails. Anything you want to send that you think should get to other members, always send it to Brianna or Perla, me, Mike, and we'll gauge your intentions and try to figure out whether that's something that needs to be posted on an agenda, something that can go on the discussion board. We have a discussion board for that very reason. And we can discuss it with the chair, and again, decide whether we post it on the agenda or put it on the message board. Briefly, the penalties under the Open Meetings Act, the walking quorum that we just discussed, is a Class C misdemeanor, which is $500 in 6 months. These next two are kind of interesting because you shouldn't have this problem if I'm doing my job. Knowingly participating in or calling an illegal closed meeting or a closed meeting where a record is not kept. Again, that's me doing my job. Notice that on that first one, it's a defense if you rely on a written opinion of mine or Trelicia. If we write an opinion and say, yes, this can go into closed session, none of you can be held responsible. So always best to ask us. Knowing disclosure of information from a certified agenda or a record of a closed meeting. This is a biggie, and there have actually been some prosecutions on this. People have gone out and discussed real estate deals, especially. That's a big no-no. I strongly encourage you not to discuss anything with any outside party that you heard in a closed session, because often you just don't know what ramifications there are from the things that staff tells you beyond just your reason for knowing. Lastly, there are civil penalties against the governmental body for any violation of the act. If we don't post properly, if the language of the posting is inadequate, someone can go to court and a judge can order the body to rehear the matter, redecide it, and can overturn their decisions. So we have to be careful how we post things and how we act on them. So we will always try to help you guys with that aspect of it, because that really is our job to help you properly post and properly conduct your meetings. So, and with that, I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, David. We appreciate that information. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask first, and then I'll open it up for other board members. One question is, previously we had gone to gatherings and then the chair would have to sort of call the meeting to order, and then is that language, do we still have to do that or no?
That was what I was discussing. If it's a social gathering or a press event or something like that, we will decide. And if we decide, okay, this is going to be a quorum event, there was a quorum present at the last one I'm aware of I went to, and there was a quorum present briefly at something having to do with the demolition at Brackenridge. Oh, it was a commemoration of an anniversary at Brackenridge. Mm-hmm. And it was done on the roof of the parking garage. And I drove up there and went, and we did not announce it as a public meeting. And in large part because we didn't call it. Back to that point I was making, it was not ours. It happened to be our facility. We were kind of teetering. Okay, we own the parking garage, but we have it leased out. that one was really it was a bit of a tortured analysis, but we ultimately decided this just isn't our meeting. We didn't call this. Somebody invited us to it. We have more than 4 here. And so I went again in the vein of the social gathering thing to make sure that people didn't wander off in a group and start talking about, and no one came even close to that. Everybody stayed pretty much separate. Talked to, I believe the UT president was there, and some of the folks from the Dell Medical School, and it was just never. I mean, it was what it was intended to be, which was a social gathering on a specific topic. And so, if that ever is necessary, we're going to let you know well in advance. And it has caused, on one occasion, we told people, hey, we're going to probably have to announce this in a meeting, and somebody said, oh, then I won't go, and we got down to 4, and then we're done. So that will happen occasionally too, is somebody will realize, oh, then we're going to have to read that thing and keep minutes, and yeah, it's not worth it.
Okay. And then my other is the 2 entities that are within the enterprise, Community Care and Sendero. They are not covered under the Open Meetings Act.
That is correct. They are not governmental entities.
Or the PIA.
I am not going to opine on that in this setting. I can't answer that. It depends. The answer is it depends. What somebody asks for and how they ask for it. And so I really don't want to talk about that.
Okay, well, don't talk about it. I just wanted to clarify that those 2 entities were under the open meetings.
Yes.
But I guess if we had a public information request from any of those entities, we'd have to run it by legal.
For something that they possessed.
Yes.
Yes. You'd have, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Any other questions? Those were my questions. Manager Valedis?
Oh, where are we? She's trying to unmute.
You're on mute.
Am I unmuted now?
No, you're okay now. I can hear you.
Oh, thank you. So just to follow up real quickly, Dr. Bell, to yours, David, what about the CCC?
Also, not subject to the Open Meetings Act. Same answer on Public Information Act.
Okay, and then just a real simple one. What about 2021 legislative sessions, plural? Were there any updates or changes to any of the laws that would impact us?
No, not really. I mean, the ones that I mentioned earlier, they did tweak the emergency standards for meetings, and made it previously you could have an emergency meeting or add an emergency addition to an agenda, and they changed that so that if you do an emergency posting, all you can act on is the emergency. That's it. So they narrowed it down somewhat. I think the legislature was a little bit peeved at some liberties that people had taken with the governor's waiver of a lot of the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Public Information Act, they barely changed a thing. They hardly touched it this time. So I would have let y'all know if they'd changed anything very much. They really didn't mess with it much this time.
Thank you.
Huh? Manager Musaitis?
Thank you. I have a question that I come across that it's been, I carry many hats in the community. So how do I separate those? Like if I'm in a meeting and happens other board members attend, how do I separate myself from my given role? Or is it always giving that I carry the central health hat?
Under the Constitution, you are a member until you are replaced. So you're a member everywhere you are. Now, I know that there's no way that you can anticipate if you go to a public health forum at Dell Medical School in that big auditorium, which I've been to, and 4 other members show up just unannounced. Again, I don't have concern about that. We didn't call it. It just so happened that 5 board members show up, follow my advice, and don't, sit all of you 5 together, spread out a little bit. It just visually is that what would drive a violation of the act? Absolutely not. Is that the kind of thing that might get the attention of someone who might lodge a complaint? Possibly. I mean, that's the thing. So I would just say, don't talk about work. Don't talk about central health work. Now, does that mean you're in that audience and you can't ask the presenter, okay, I'm on a board of a local hospital district and we have this issue. What would you say about that? Absolutely, you can do that. Again, it's incidental to the social function. That's what that language means. Your discussion of your role, even as a board member, can come up. That's fine. You're not doing it for the purpose of getting your fellow board members to engage in that deliberation in that context. I think you're fine. That's not going to be a problem.
Manager Jones, did I see your hand?
Yeah, yes, I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if they relate to the PIA or not, but I'll ask them, you can correct me. The first one is, I understand the importance of communicating by way of emails separate for your personal from your central health one.
No.
But I have both of them on my cell phone, and I have a habit of responding from my cell phone on each of the different emails account. So am I understanding you to say that if I respond on my phone to the email account with Central Health, that what I've communicated on my other private account is accessible?
It depends on the nature of the communication. If the communication is in your role as a board member relating to Central Health business, the fact that it's on your personal email account is not, that doesn't answer the question. It's the nature of the communication that answers the question, whether that's a public record. Now, when it gets, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, and I'll follow up on what you're about.
I was just going to qualify that by saying the records retention laws of the state come into play here as well. So if you, like me, I don't like keeping text strings for 2 and 3 years. If you go in every 30, 60 days and delete whole old text strings, that's fine. That is something that you can do, and that's not any kind of violation of the act. That's fine. Don't do it for the purpose of, oh, we got a request. Oh, I need to get rid of those text messages. Don't do that. But your records retention on your personal account is your records retention, just as it is on your email and other accounts. As long as, if you have an official account at Central Health, we have a retention period specified for emails, that sort of thing. But I want to put your mind at ease that we're not going to manage your phone for you. That's not the objective. It's just the day we get a request, if there's something responsive, we're just going to ask all of you, have you communicated? We're thinking about buying this land out by Lake Travis for the population that's out there. Have you communicated with anybody about that? Because we've been asked for any board member communications about our potential purchase of land in this part of town. And if the answer is yes, okay, where are they? So it will be more about the scope of the communication than anything.
Well, I'd like to talk offline with you about, because a couple of things. One is that I get I get occasional communications from others who know of my role in the past as public health director and my engagement in other things sent to my Central Health email account. And I usually refer them to my direct account, but at the point they send it, it's not intentional, but it has occurred. So my concern is whether or not I should ask Central Health or the state to provide me a separate cell phone so that I'll be able to accommodate that on that phone, and then I won't have to worry about that problem. Actually, with the city of Austin, they paid you an allowance, a stipend. This was an employee, of course, and you were responsible for your own account. Now, under this arrangement, it sounds like we're being held accountable for our personal use of our phone, even if it's even if it's separate, 2 different accounts on the same phone. And it just seems to be somewhat challenging. I'll just say that at best. So I'll talk with you offline about that. That was one thing. The last question related to, and this happens from time to time. I try to be careful, but I've been guilty of it. People will send me an email inviting me to participate in something for the board. I mean, inviting me to participate, but they include all of the board members. Well, I may not see all of the board members. I just see my name, and I respond and reply all, because there are other names other than board members. I guess my question there is, so are you suggesting that we should never reply all, period? End of question.
I'd prefer that you look down the list and see who's there before you reply to all. I mean, that's something that the subject of the email may not be, it's number one, focus on what the email's about. If the email is, I really want the board to do this on this thing that is before it, be very aware if there are any other members on there, because then what you're doing is you're talking about work and you're talking about it with a quorum. So if you keep those two separated, if it's, let me surmise.
So like a scheduling issue, for example.
Scheduling issue, yes. What I was thinking is an invitation to a social event. So you get an invitation to a clinic opening and you reply and say, I'd love to go. That's not a problem. I don't have any concerns about that whatsoever. That again relates to the social event exception anyway. It won't even be a meeting if you go. So the fact that you communicated it under the PIA, if somebody asks for it, all communications related to, well, it's not even policy. It has nothing to do with the board's actions. It's just a social event that somebody got invited to. So it depends, again, on the initial nature of the communication. And if it is related to central health work, the budget, the tax rate, things that are just inherently within the purview of the board, be very careful about replying to all.
Yeah, mindful of it. Mine related more to the former of the social events, and that's, so I'll be careful. I'll start reading every line in the topic carefully.
Thank you, Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Jones. One final thing, David. A lot of times if I'm asked about something that deals with board issues, I just copy like Brianna or Perla or Mike when I answer, all right? Therefore, you guys have a record of it because you have a copy of it. And, there really isn't, all I'm doing is have a copy of it on my phone. Is
Correct.
that okay?
Yes, multiple copies of the same. If we were to request an AG opinion, let's say you communicated with one of our outside lawyers on something, and you copied me and Tralisha and Monica and Mike. We have a copy of that. That is the copy we will produce.
Okay.
Again, there's some difficulty if there's a written, if it's a written communication and you write a note on it, then there's two again. But electronic communications, it is very simple for us to produce one copy and say, there are 7 redundant copies. Look, there are 6 people copied on his email. Therefore, there are 7. He's got 1. And then the 6 people who received it, this is an email. It's protected, period. Okay. So yeah, that's a good strategy. And again, if you want to avoid some of the problems of operating off of a personal email address, copy your central health email address when you send an email, because then it's within our servers and we can find it.
Got it. Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Manager Zamora.
May I have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So David, most of my colleagues in Travis County know I'm part of the board. So many times I'll get phone calls from them about board events, things that are going on. Particularly this past week, I had a phone call from one of the ophthalmologists who I guess now works for the Dell about contracting with them for our patients. Who do I need to call? I went ahead and called him back and spoke with him and told him I would get back with him. But is that something I need to refer to Brianna or you or Perla or?
Yeah, that's a good point. And whether it's that or even, substantive issues, obviously not something that's subject to the PIA because it's not recorded. There's no, you may have gotten a voicemail message, but if it's just, hey, this is Dr. So-and-so, call me back. If somebody asks about potential contracts between the district and providers, that's not even responsive. That's just a voicemail message asking you to call him back. And the phone call itself would probably not be recorded. But the conversation itself, does that lead to any concerns about discussion outside of you discussing? All of you are going to run into somebody in the grocery store or at a professional gathering. You're going to be in a professional context and somebody's going to bring up central health business. You are free to discuss our business with third parties. I know it's going to happen. That is not an issue. When it rises to the level of something that needs consideration by the entity, I'm not even going to say the board. So Mike needs to know about it. Refer it to Mike. Refer it to John Morgan. In that case, it sounds like to me. I'm sorry. Now I'm getting into your organization and telling people where to call. But always a good idea to refer those to staff. Brianna and Perla or your primary conduits, and they will make sure that it gets to the right person, or Mike. If any of you ever have any questions about any of this, if something comes up and it just gives you a funny feeling, or something doesn't seem right, call me, text me. You all have my cell number. Call me anytime. I will answer. Send me an email. But no, that doesn't present a problem really at all. The phone call.
So the next thing, David, is that he wants to meet with me over coffee to discuss this. All I could say is sure, listen to his concerns, and tell him I'm bringing it back to the board. And that's not appropriate. Is that appropriate?
I mean, not a problem as long as, a cup of coffee is a cup of coffee. It's fine as long as there's another, actually, I see Mackenzie, who's about to be up. We're going to talk about policies on gifts.
Well, I'm not coffee, but
I'm just saying that could become an issue. But sitting down and having a cup of coffee with somebody is not an issue. It's the same thing as having a conversation with somebody in the grocery store. If it needs to end up either in front of staff or eventually in front of the board, you get it in the process, and we'll get it there.
Sure. I did speak to our CMO for Central Health, and of course he referred it back to John and to our attorney, to our counsel.
Yeah, that's what I expect. Yeah, very very common method of handling that.
It's because it's a contract. It's not something that we're doing.
Right.
David, this is Perla, and Mike, you might chime in here, but it would be, I think just pursuant to some guidelines that we established a couple of years ago, it would be great if you could start with Mike or myself or Brianna, and then, if we can help you navigate how those questions are best answered. And I think that's what we prefer.
Just start with Mike and Brianna that we're talking about.
Yeah,
there's no wrong door by going to either three of us, because we're all going to coordinate this and make sure that it gets handled appropriately and within ethical guidelines and compliance policies. So you can't go wrong with either three of us. Thank you.
All right. No further, I don't see any further questions or issues. So I will go on now to agenda item number 4, discuss board compliance policies and procedures, including A, CMP-001 compliance program description policy, B, CMP-0010 code of conduct and ethics for board members policy, C, CMP-006 reporting and non-retaliation policy, D, CMP-009 duality and conflict of interest policy, and E, CMP-009P duality and conflict of interest procedures. Mackenzie Frazier will be presenting.
Hello, board managers, and thank you for tonight's presentation time. I'm Mackenzie, the Central Health Compliance Officer. For tonight, I do not have a presentation, but the 5 compliance documents that will be referenced are within your packet. In overseeing a compliance program, I must ensure that our program not only aligns with our needs, but also aligns with industry standards. In our space, there are 7 key elements or industry standards that must be in place to ensure an efficient and effective program. These elements are having written policies and procedures and a standard of conduct, designating a compliance officer and a compliance committee, conducting effective training and education, developing effective lines of communication, which is our compliance and ethics helpline, conducting internal monitoring and auditing, enforcing standards through well-disciplinary guidelines, as well as responding promptly to offenses and undertaking corrective action. But to the element or standard of implementing written policies and procedures or having a code of conduct, I'd like to outline some compliance policies that not only support the structure, culture, and transparency of the compliance program, but just more so just keeps us in line on how to do things. The first policy is CMP 001, which is the compliance policy. So this policy is ultimately the who, what, when, and why of the compliance program. The next policy I have is CMP 006, which is the reporting and non-retaliation policy. This policy requires all employees to report in good faith relevant perceived wrongdoing and suspected violations without fear of retaliation. Not only can employees report concerns to human resources, compliance, or the CEO, if an employee feels they're not getting any support within the organization, they can come directly to you, the board, and make that same report. The next policy is CMP 0010, which is the Code of Conduct and Ethics for Board of Managers. This policy provides a set of standards for legal and ethical business conduct. It also provides guidance to the Board of Managers regarding board conduct and practices. The next policy is CMP 009, which is the Duality of Conflict of Interest policy. This policy is guidance for handling perceived and actual conflict of interest concerns. The next procedure is CMP 009P, and this is the Duality of Conflict of Interest procedures. And this procedure is guidance on how to mitigate perceived and actual conflict of interest, as well as the needed disclosures that need to be completed. With that, I open the floor for any questions here, or I can definitely take them offline.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. Appreciate that. Members, any questions for Mackenzie, Mr. Frazier? You'll need, I can't see the rest of the board members on the video. There we go. All right, any questions from board members? Yes, Manager Valedis. You're still muted. Now you're frozen.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Now she's gone.
Are you there?
Well, I can hear you.
Okay, and well, what ends up happening on this dadgum phone is as soon as I try to unmute, I lose video or I get kicked off and I have to start over and go back. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we have not had any changes to my knowledge of any of the policies. So if you were here last year, it's the same information. Just wanted to make sure that that's correct.
Yes, that is correct. No, to the 5 policies that have been referenced, there hasn't been any significant content changes.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Manager Jones? Yes. Thank you, Manager Valedis. Manager Jones?
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Frazier. This is very helpful. I think I would like to talk offline about some of these. I think the question of duality and being proactive in preventing that is important because some of us are still engaged in a lot of community activity and we don't want to run afoul, but the question of interpretation of conflict is always the root of the problem. So perhaps if I can schedule a meeting offline with you to talk about some of those, I would certainly appreciate it.
Yep. I'll reach out and lock in some time with you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Manager Jones. Any further comments, questions for Mr. Frazier? Hearing none, I will call up agenda item number 5. Receive and discuss an update regarding Sendero Health Plans Incorporated, including an update on enrollment for 2022. Wes Derkowski will be presenting. And by the way, members, there is a CHAP expansion memo in your backup. Kit Abney Spelch is available for questions if you have any, but it's there for you to read. Mr. Derkowski.
Thank you, Dr. Bell and managers. Happy to be back.
Excuse me, Wes. Manager Musaiki.
Is it in this packet? Where was it?
It's in the backup of the it's right after he has a slide two slides, and then behind those two slides is your
It's packet page
memo.
120 and 121.
120, 121. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Dokowski. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Bell and the managers. Happy to be back. And I have a few very brief comments and then happy for any questions. First off, we are very pleased that our enrollment came in at almost 9,000. This is way above underwriting forecasts, as there were many affordable options for the community. So it's a testament to the strength of our reputation and the satisfaction of the members we've had. About 2/3 of our members were renewal. The CHAP program membership increased year over year. Actual numbers was over 18%, 769, and many heartfelt thanks to the board for your support for this valuable program. We have a lot of good stories. And on the economic side, there is not a more economic care mechanism, financing mechanism available. So we're happy to be able to do this for the community. Finally, as you may recall from our last meetings, we had been discussing pursuing potential Medicaid partnerships to reenter Medicaid. And the simple idea on that is that examining a return to Medicaid made sense, as all the other districts participate in Medicaid to steer resources to their safety net providers. And so we're always wondering if that makes sense here. So as part of that, or in line with that, we're also very happy to be participating in the Guidehouse strategy, strategic planning exercise with Central Health. And so I'm sure as part of that, we'll be coming back with some interesting suggestions for the next 5-10 years. And so with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Wes. I appreciate that. Any questions from board members? I see Manager Jones.
One quick question. Could we get a update demographic profile as well as a geographic profile of membership at some point?
Definitely. So historically, the membership does pretty much reflect the areas where Central Health's efforts are mostly focused. But for this current year, I think definitely next time we'll get you some kind of summary of the current membership and where they are all from.
Well, the demographics as well.
Oh yeah, we can do the full thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Manager Jones. Manager Valedis.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Wes, thank you for the great job that you're doing over at Sendero and that what Sendero is doing for our population. My question is whether or not there's any communication between you and the hospitals that may be located outside of Travis County, interested in building, let's say in Bastrop County or Caldwell County, any of the counties, or Hayes County, outside of Travis County, where you serve as an insurance provider to members, and whether or not y'all are keeping track of how many of your members are receiving services at those hospitals located there, and what the proposed impact could be to new members coming in and receiving services at those hospitals. And the reason I say that is because we're participating in the LPPF. Mm-hmm. And if we keep track of where the other hospitals are moving to, I'm presuming that that's going to be directly relevant or related to Austinites moving out of Travis County because of affordability issues, and maybe receiving services through those hospitals through your insurance. And I was just trying to see whether or not you're keeping track of that.
So the short one is, I don't have anything to share, but you are correct, probably on both parts. And first is that we like to keep a very broad open network. And yes. So we do constantly talk to everybody, whether they're in network or not. And on the actual services, this is true. Like our data would reflect a shift in services or outside. And we can bring back I mean, I don't know, maybe as part of the strategic planning, but we'll definitely
Yeah.
be bringing back what we,
Yeah.
any trends we see on shifts.
I appreciate that because I think that's a shareable piece of data and relevant to what we're going to be trying to achieve with respect to providing services where people live. And you're part of our enterprise. And the more people that we can service that are moving out due to displacement or gentrification, maybe that's more people that we can sign up for other programs here in Travis County. And try and see whether or not there is a direct relationship between the two.
Happy to do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Manager Valedis. Any other questions or comments for Wes? Seeing none here and none online, I will call up agenda item number 6. Receive and discuss updates on the, and thank you very much, Wes. Receive and discuss updates on the 1115 Medicaid waiver, Delivery System Reform Incentive Payment, DSRIP program, and associated projects, the Community Care Collaborative, and other healthcare delivery partners, programs, projects, and arrangements, including agreements with Ascension, Texas.
Excuse me, Dr.
Managers, I'd like to announce that the board is convening in closed session to discuss agenda item 6 under the Texas Government Code, section 551.071, consultation with attorney.
Excuse
So,
me, Dr. Bell.
yes, Manager Valedis.
I'm sorry. I just had a real quick question to ask Kit if she's available on this memo.
I tell you what, can we take that offline and let you like send your written question to
Well,
Kit?
I'll just ask the question and have her call me with a response, or at least provide, if anybody else is interested on the board, in her response. But basically, what I wanted to know is, and this may be easy for you to answer, have we moved our membership time period from 6 months to a year yet?
Okay, well, I'll have her get back with you on
That's
that.
very simple. Okay, for Matt and Matt Basic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think I read it. Members that are online, you're going to have to log off of the link that you're on. You were sent a link for the closed session, and you need to log on to that closed session. We will take a short pause here so that we can get all of the members here into the closed session. So we'll see you in a minute.
Somebody help me.
The date is February the 23rd, and the time is 7:09.
Dr. Bell?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that, do I need to do anything because I'm using my phone?
She needs to get on the other meeting.
Yes, you're gonna have to hang up from your phone. And then there is another email that was sent with the closed session information.
Okay,
And
thank
you'll
you.
use that information to log into the closed session.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.